This is the key events of the French Revolution Flip It video. Please have your worksheets ready. The French Revolution can be divided into 4 phases. Phase 1 is the old regime. Regime meaning old government. Now the government, of course, in France at this time, at the French Revolution, was King Louis XVI with his extravagant gowns and spending and his tights and all this nice stuff. He also had his wife, Queen Marie Antoinette, who had a nickname called Madame Deficit. She loved her hairdos, as you could see in these pictures. And they lived the high life, especially at the coin of the peasant. Now, the ultimate example of the extravagance of the monarchy in France was the building of the Palace of Versailles. This is the building that King Louis XIV built. It took 28 years to build. Today, if they were going to build it, it would cost $2 billion. They had it's larger than the island of Manhattan, the entire ground, so New York City. And the stables alone held over 2,000 horses. So it's unbelievably huge, extravagant palace. There's a room here inside the palace called the Hall of Mirrors. And the Hall of Mirrors basically is a hallway that is 240 feet long. There are 43 solid silver chandeliers. What's also interesting about this hallway is later on, the treaty to end World War I would be signed here. So this is just an unbelievably extravagant palace. Now, as we learned last time, the French society was divided up into 3 estates. The first 2 estates, the first and second estate, held all the power. The first estate being the clergy, and the second estate being the nobles. Again, they held all the power, owned all the land, and the main thing is they were not taxed. The third estate, of course, the bourgeoisie, the city workers and the peasants, they had the burden of the entire country on their backs. Oh my God! Yes, France is going to have many, many problems because of this setup. Now, the problem that France is going to have is, number 1, is a food shortage. They had a huge drought, terrible winter, and a huge explosion in their population. So the price of bread is actually going to go way up, and people are not going to be able to afford that. So when people are hungry, they get upset. So that's a major problem. Secondly, they are involved in a lot of wars. And the first war, of course, is a war called the 7 Years' War. And of course, it's going to be against, as you notice right here, Great Britain, because the French and the British are enemies. And finally, the American Revolution comes about, and the French decide to help the Americans with their revolution against the British, of course, to defeat this terrible foe of the British. Now, these wars are going to cause, of course, this tremendous debt. And that is going to be the main problem in France. This brings us to phase 2, the liberal phase. And liberal means change. This is the phase in which changes are going to happen in France, both politically and socially. This brings us to event 1, the Estates General. Now, the Estates General was a meeting called of all 3 estates to come to try to figure out this debt crisis. Now, this meeting had not been called for over almost 200 years, and the third estate was actually very, very excited, especially the bourgeoisie, because they thought they were going to have a say in the government. When they get to this meeting, the third estate quickly realizes that there's a problem. All 3 estates get 1 vote. The problem with that is, whenever there's a vote, the first 2 estates will always outvote the third estate 2-1. Nothing's going to get done. The third estate quickly realizes this, gets very upset, and after a few weeks they become so unruly that they show up one day and they're actually locked out of the meeting. So now that they're locked out, they need a place to meet, the third estate does. So they go next door to a tennis court, and they basically go in and they make 2 things happen during this meeting. And here's a picture of the tennis court oath right here. They do 2 things. First of all, they form a new group, and they are no longer going to be really called the First Estate. They're going to be called the National Assembly. Okay? So they're going to form the National Assembly. And this National Assembly then makes this important oath. And their oath is this: they are going to never disband until they get a new constitution. That's the oath. They will fight until a new constitution is written. Event 3 is a very, very important event, the storming of the Bastille. The National Assembly has been formed at the tennis court oath. now what happens is the king, King Louis, decides that he must disband this new group of Third Estate members, which is the National Assembly. So these rumors start going around the city that the king is bringing in troops. The National Assembly hears this. They need to protect themselves. So they decide to go and get weapons. Now, they have plenty of guns. The problem is they don't have enough gunpowder. There's only one place in Paris that they can get this gunpowder, and it's the Bastille. The Bastille is a terrible, horrible, dank prison. And this prison is a place that holds tons of gunpowder. So the National Assembly goes to the Bastille. They storm in, and they are able to grab this gunpowder. And it's basically this symbolic prison of the king is a falling of the king. It's a symbolic falling of the king because the Bastille is a hated symbol of the king. This is a huge event, and it's basically the first event of the revolution. Now, you can also see here that the French flag is invented or carried for the first time in this event as well. And we have this political cartoon here, which states basically that the Third Estate has now broken away from the chains of the First and Second Estate. They're grabbing their weapons, and they are going ahead with revolution. So after the storming of the Bastille, the revolution really starting to take hold, and the National Assembly is really gaining a lot of power. Now the problem is King Louis XVI now knows he has a revolution on his hands. So what he needs to do is he needs to stop this thing. However, Event 4 is something called the Great Fear. And this is the fear, not of the Third Estate, but it's the fear of the nobles and the the clergy and all the upper class. They're starting to fear this idea of revolution. And you can see right here this map. This is a French map, of course. La Grande Pielle, I guess. That's how you say it. Who knows? All right. I took Spanish in high school, just to let you know. This is showing all these hot spots of revolution within France starting to spread out amongst France. So this great fear of the people of France, the nobility of France. This now brings us to Event 5. So we've had the Estates General, then we've had the Tennis Court Oath, then we had the storming of the Bastille, the Great Fear, and now Event 5, the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Now the National Assembly begins to write down what they believe should be the rights of all men in France. Now notice I'm not saying women, because women weren't considered important enough to have rights in France at this time as well. So you'll notice that the rights of man really will talk about all the rights that men should have. And a key phrase, a key slogan of the French Revolution will now come out of this document. And the slogan of the French Revolution will then become liberty, which of course means freedom, equality, and fraternity. Okay? And fraternity basically means brotherhood. Now you can see a lot of the symbols here on this little document. We see that the chains are broken. The Third Estate has now been broken. The National Assembly, they've freed themselves. God is looking upon the people in the revolution. We have the eye of God, or, looking down across. And we see this on our own money as well. So a lot of symbols within this Declaration of the Rights of Man. Now, a very important event, which is Event 6, is the Women's March on Versailles. So as the revolution kind of continues on, the price of bread is still out of control. And a famous quote of Marie Antoinette, when people were complaining about the bread, was she said, "Let them eat cake." And that was kind of a disparaging remark. However, as history has shown, Queen Marie Antoinette never said that. So what happens is the women are so upset with the price of bread, they decide to march on Versailles. And this is a picture within our book that they see the women going up to Versailles to demand the king talk to them. One thing I've always noticed about this is that all the young ladies in this picture, if you notice, are making the older ladies here kind of pull the cannon. A little rough. There's like grandma here. Help me, help me. All right. So they get to Versailles, and here's the key thing that happens. They demand the king come out and talk to them. And this is the first time that the king will ever directly talk to his subjects. Now remember, Versailles is 12 to 16 miles outside of Paris. They walk the whole way. Then what they do is they bring the king and Marie Antoinette out of the palace, and they bring them back to Paris, bring them back to the people, and they basically kind of hold them prisoner in the downtown Paris. Now all of a sudden, the king is at the mercy of the people. Now we get to the moment that the National Assembly's been waiting. 1791, they finally write a constitution. And this constitution is going to take away church lands. It's going to do many, many things. However, you see in this picture that the nobility, that the merchants, and the peasants are working together to hammer this constitution out. Now, the constitution set up a limited monarchy in France because they still had the king there. And the king was been part of their lives for many, many years. They couldn't get rid of it. So a constitutional monarchy where the monarch was still going to be in power but had to follow laws. After the signing of the Constitution of 1791, the king did not want to be in a limited monarchy, and King Louis XVI wanted full power once again. So they, in the middle of the night, with his family, with his wife Queen Marie, they sneak out of Paris dressed as servants, and they take their carriage across France in order to escape to another country, bring back armies, and bring back the crown. Now, where do you think they're going to escape to? They're going to escape, of course, to Austria, because Austria is where Queen Marie is from, and she's going to go and get an army there and come back and bring the monarchy back. They're 35 miles away. They're actually going to make it out of France. Late at night, the king gets stopped. His carriage gets stopped by two border guards, and 35 miles away from freedom. These border guards bring the king out. He's dressed as a servant. They're ready to let him go. But one of the servants actually, or one of the border guards actually, goes into his pocket and finds this and looks closely at this coin. And he realizes that this is a picture of King Louis, and it's the same man that's standing in front of him. They realize King Louis is trying to escape. They send King Louis back to Paris, and this is going to spell the end for the king and queen in France. Going to happen next. We will see, ladies and gents.